how are you? It's me again, my little corner of the internet, ASMR Classic, and thank you very much for joining me for what I hope will become a fairly relaxing video. I am, move my receipt out of the way. Still got a bit of a cold as well, but I've not been here for a little while because I've been at the Edinburgh Festival, the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which runs for all of August in Scotland, of course, in Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland. I've actually been going up there since 1992. I think that's the first time. I'd say I think I know it was. I'd written an adaptation of Henry V by William Shakespeare, and it got picked up by a fairly famous comedian's management company, weirdly. And they took us up there, and I was blown away by it. And I've been up most years since. And this time I was doing, a literary pub crawl. And I thought I might share some of these I got back from Edinburgh. As you can see, this is a book by Alan Foster called The Literary Traveller in Edinburgh. I think he also may do a tour. That's a very lovely man called Sir Ian Rankin. I don't know if you've heard of the the detective Inspector Rebus, but he was actually very helpful to me, which I appreciated, being a very famous, clever man, and me being just little old me. Still, by the way, trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and thank you so much that we're at 600 now, which is pretty good when you think a few months ago we got 20. So thank you so much for subscribing. I'm actually starting to work on an idea for something that we could do on here if we get to 1,000 and this channel gets monetized. So if you're new here, then thank you again. Please think of subscribing. I think you also have to click the like buttons, or you probably know more about it than I do. Yeah. And the reason for doing an ASMR channel was that I started to use it. It was during COVID, actually, I think. Found it very relaxing, and I do use it every night now. Good old John Butler. Yes. Anyway, I thought I'd share this with you because it's quite an interesting book. And as you can see here, this is from when I was doing my research into Edinburgh. I mean, one of the glories of doing something like this is the same with the London literary pub crawl. Writing is a chief pleasure. And discovering new writers, and what they did there, of course, is Jo Rowling. Bless her, J.K. Rowling. There's Sherlock Holmes. All these were creations of, Scottish writers. I actually became quite fond of a writer that I knew very little about. Oh, here we go. Oh, I'm going to lose my notes. Move these out the way. As you can see, Alan's book is a book lover's guide to the world's first city of literature, and that's a fact. Edinburgh was the UNESCO World City of Literature, the first one in 2004. And of course, if you go there by train, you are instantly celebrating a writer because their train station is called Waverley. And Waverley is the first novel, of course, by Scott. The Scott Monument is also, I don't know if there's a picture, no there's not. The Scott Monument's also one of the biggest monuments to a writer anywhere in the world, and that's on Princes Street in Edinburgh. Excuse me. Robert Louis Stevenson, another guy, of course. Take not my hand as mine alone. You do not trust to me. I hold the hand of greater men, too far before to see. Follow not me, who only trace stoop head, the prints of those, our mighty predecessors whom the darknesses enclose. I cannot lead who follow. I who learn am dumb to teach. I can but indicate the goals that greater men shall reach. Robert Louis Stevenson, Recruiting Songs from 1872. He also famously wrote, of course, I'll tell you about it later. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde's quite an interesting story. But Edinburgh's a beautiful city if you get a chance to go. And it's a beautiful city even out of the Fringe, of course. Deacon Brodie is a notorious burglar who fascinated, inspired, no less than Robert Louis Stevenson. And he wrote a play. Do you see this table, Walter? He made it while he was yet apprentice. I remember how I used to sit and watch him at his work. It would be grand, I thought, to be able to do as he did, and handle edge tools without cutting my fingers and getting my ears pulled for a meddlesome minx. That's from Deacon Brodie, or The Double Life in 1880 by Robert Louis Stevenson, W.E. Henley, and possibly not the most famous of plays, but you will probably know the story, of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which Robert Louis Stevenson also wrote about Deacon Brodie. So he was a burglar, but he was also quite a successful businessman in the day. So by day he was a successful businessman, but by night he was not. And he was anything but a successful businessman. I'm just going to see if I can turn my pings off, because it's not really good for what I hope will be a fairly relaxing video. It's here somewhere, isn't it? Yes, there we go. Let's go on to Do Not Disturb for a bit. I think that might work. And then Old Town here. Excuse me. Old Town, as you can... It's kind of weird because even New Town is old in Edinburgh. Possibly the most marvellous feature of Old Town is the castle, Edinburgh Castle. George Borrow wrote, "It is hardly necessary to say much about this castle, which everybody has seen, on which account doubtless nobody has ever yet thought fit to describe it. At least that's what I am aware. Be this as it may, I have no intention of describing it." George Borrow in 1851. And as it says here, it may look like Colditz. There is a picture of the castle thanks to the book. But in actual fact, it's not a very successful castle, because most of the marauding armies... I can't get that. Let me move William out of the way. Behave, William. Most of the marauding armies just went straight past Edinburgh Castle. It's not actually very well situated, although of course it is in Edinburgh. So all the marauding armies just used to go past it, just bypass it. Stirling Castle, which is about 30 or 40 miles to the north, is far more strategically placed. And that's where all the battles used to happen. But it's still a very beautiful place to look at and look upon. Excuse me. And then, of course, one of my new faves, someone who I didn't think I would be taken with, although I also didn't realise how much of his work I knew, is, can you guess, a Robert Burns, Robbie Burns. I shouldn't really do the accent, but I've been really impressed by Robert Burns. And excuse me again. There's a Scottish writing centre in Edinburgh, and I popped in for a little look around, as you would do, at some of the books that they got, and came across this Robert Burns in Your Pocket, a biography and selected poems and songs of Scotland's national poet. The introductions here. Again, apologies for my cold. Robert Burns was born on the 25th of January, 1759, the eldest son of an Alloway farmer. His family led a very frugal, physically demanding life, and the young Robert wrote poetry as an escape from these circumstances. Oops, there we go, sorry I've lost you. By his mid-20s he was an accomplished writer of verse, publishing his first work, poems, chiefly in the Scottish dialect, in 1786. Burns, the ploughman's poet as he was known, the ploughman poet I should say, could write as easily about politics, history, Scottish nationalism, his hatred of pomposity and social disadvantage, and the excitement of having illicit love affairs, of which he had many, as he could about nature and his admiration for beauty. He died on the 21st of July 1796, but he had lived a full life in his 37 years. A celebrity and a prolific poet, he left behind a body of work that remains undiminished in importance to this day. And even if you're not a poet, excuse me, and wherever you are in the world, you'll know, at least you'll probably have sung Auld Lang Syne on New Year's Eve, and that is one of Robbie Burns' poems as well. I quite like the fact that he set out for the capital city in Edinburgh in 1786 to arrange a second edition of his work, encouraged by Dr. Blacklock, a blind Edinburgh poet of some distinction who Burns respected. Dr. Blacklock was enthusiastic about the poems in the Kilmarnock edition, and Burns was filled with happy disbelief that such a respected man could be an admirer of his work. Within a fortnight of his arrival in Edinburgh, the poet was already mixing with important members of Edinburgh society. Owing to his popularity in Ayrshire, Burns was fairly well accustomed to meeting important and impressive people. He was neither shy nor awkward in the company of those who became those to whom he was introduced. He was treated as an equal, or so it seemed, by the aristocrats, university professors, ministers and advocates who became his friends and patrons. Those whom he met were charmed by his appearance and manners, and his frank, vigorous but modest conversation. In particular, he appealed to the ladies of fashion, led by Jane, Duchess of Gordon, who held court both in Edinburgh and London, and counted among her admirers the Prime Minister William Pitt, and even the King himself. She invited Burns to several of her drawing-room parties, accompanied him to balls and assemblies, and generally behaved in a way that caused a minor scandal. Or what was that Housewives programme? In reality, it was a minor scandal. Burns did not let all this go to his head, though, and behaved modestly. Quote, "The attentions he received," said Dougald Stewart, a professor at Edinburgh University, "from all ranks and descriptions of persons were such as he would have turned any head but his own." Sir Walter Scott, of course we just mentioned him, the Scottish novelist famous for his historical novels such as Waverley, The Antiquity, Old Mortality, The Heart of Midlothian, and The Battle of Lohner's Moor, was a lad of 15 when he met Robbie Burns. He wrote a vivid description of his appearance. He wrote, and this is from Sir Walter Scott, so it's not bad going, is it? He wrote, "His person was strong and robust, his manners rustic, not clownish, a sort of dignified plainness and simplicity which received part of its effect perhaps from one's knowledge of his extraordinary talents. I think his countenance was more massive than it looks in any of the portraits. I would have taken the poet, had I not known what he was, for a very sagacious country farmer of the old Scottish school." Burns was about 5 feet 10 inches in height, with a slight stoop due to years of working at the plough, I think. Yes, at the plough. He was dark-haired, with keen black glowing eyes, such as Scott declared he had never seen in any other person. His conversation free, unaffected, ever interesting, his dress midway between the holiday costume of a farmer and that of the company with which he was now associated. He soon became a popular figure in Edinburgh. He went from his society meetings where he debated with professors and turned the heads of duchesses to share a bed in the garret of John Richmond, an old friend from Ayrshire, who was then a lawyer's clerk in Edinburgh. The friends lodged in the house of Mrs. Carfack, I think you say that, in Baxter's Close in Lawn Market, which is in Edinburgh, where together they paid 3 shillings a week for the room. Because of the cramped living conditions in the old town of Edinburgh, the various levels of society mixed freely with each other. The tenement buildings, set in crowded closes and narrow wynds, housed a great variety of types, occupations and classes. The better classes lived in the middle flats, with the really poor below them at ground level, and the shopkeepers and artisans above them. In the attics lived clerks and labourers, and everyone had to squeeze past each other up and down their narrow winding stairs. that's a few hundred years, it is still kind of gloriously like that. The very first time we went to Edinburgh, again it was arranged by this comedian's management company, we ended up on the third floor of a flat overlooking the meadows, and it was indeed a winding stairway. I do believe it was Arthur Conan Doyle, that actually had a flat below us, or a middle flat. Of course, it doesn't matter so much about your status now. I mean, we were actors and writers, and obviously we were in the cheap seats upstairs. So he's a fascinating character. He the very first time he came to Edinburgh, Robert Burns actually borrowed a pony to cycle in and met his first supporter, and managed to sell the copyright, which I think he did, to his first book of poetry. He was also encouraged, of course, to write in the Scottish dialect, although fortunately they called it modern Scottish dialect, because I have some trouble understanding it. Excuse me. And I'll just show you a little illustration here. I have some trouble understanding it. I think kind of ancient or older Scottish would have been almost unrecognisable, which of course is the glory of languages anyway. Do you remember a time before the internet? Yes, there was, dear listener, viewer, reader. There was a time. And I know in Birmingham, in the English Midlands, 3 or 4 miles down the road from actually where I was born, their language in the Black Country, Dudley, is almost, was on occasions, almost unrecognisable. But I'll give you an example of this. This is the Twa Dogs, which I've just come to. I haven't read this one before. The one I love is A Fond Kiss. And there's a whole story about A Fond Kiss with Robbie Burns staying at a pub called the White Hart, which is on Grassmarket, which I frequented often during the last Edinburgh Fringe. But this is the poem with social comment. It is a conversation between a rich dog called Caesar. See what he's doing here? Oh, sorry, let's make this out. And a poor dog called Lewis, with the unexpected twist that Caesar makes the case for the poor, while Lewis is more willing to accept his circumstances. Lewis was the name of a dog of Burns, who was killed in a fight. The night before his father's death, Burns said that he would immortalise him. Caesar is an imaginary creation, a tale. 'Twas in that place, of Scotland's isle, that bears the name of old King Kyle. Upon a bonny day in June, when wearing through the afternoon, twa dogs that were na thrang at home, at Ham, forgathered ance upon a time. The first I'll name, they called him Caesar, who, keep it, for his honour's pleasure, his hair, his size, his mouth, his lungs, lugs, showed he was nae of Scotland's dogs, but whalpit some place far abroad, where sailors gang to fish for cod. His locked-lettered, braw brass collar showed him the gentleman, and scholar. Do you see what I mean about the actual modern Scottish? It's glorious, isn't it? But he cars his coach, he cars his house, he draws a bonny silken purse, as langs my tail, where through the steeks the yellow-lettered Geordie keeks. Frae morn to e'en, from morn to evening, it's naught but toiling at baking, roasting, frying, boiling, and though the gentry first are stetching, yet ere the far folk fill their pitchin, with sauce ragout and sick like trash tree, that's little short of downright wastree. Our whipper-in, wee blasted wanna, poor worthless elf, it eats a dinner, better than one oin tenant man. His honour has here the land, and what poor cot folk pitch their page in, I own it's past my comprehension. So you kind of get the sense of it, and I guess it's almost easier to read, isn't it, than to completely speak out. But there's a whole collection of lovely poems that he's written. Green grow the rushes out, you remember the song perhaps? Burns' admiration for women is charmingly portrayed in this song. The poet comments that nature first created man with her prentice hand, but her more accomplished and noblest work was creating women. There's naught but care on every hand in every hour that passes, oh, what signifies the life of man, as 'twere nay for the lasses, oh. And a chorus, of course, all together now. Green grow the rushes, oh, green grow the rushes, oh. The sweetest hours that e'er I spend are spent among the lasses, oh. So, yeah, a bit of a ladies' man, but I'm very taken with him. And of course, you know, it was a very different time. I gather he eventually got a little bit fed up of being this kind of celebrity farmer, and used to go home quite often. He had 4 children when he died, when he passed away. But as I say, that A Last Kiss was dedicated to a woman, a fictional woman, but it was actually based on a real woman who was leaving him after a 7-year relationship. She was leaving him to go and live with her husband in Jamaica. So they spent a night in Edinburgh, and he was motivated to write A for and Kiss. So that's your homework. You can have a look at that if you fancy. So it's so lovely to be back with you, and thank you so much as well for all those lovely kind comments that I've had. As I say, I'm not sure. Well, I think we're at 600 people now, and if we can get to 1,000 on Money Tithe, then we'll start making original works and maybe start writing some stuff. So thank you for your company. I'll leave you now. I won't keep you any longer. I hope you found this fairly relaxing. As I say, I use ASMR a lot every night, really, just to drift off, and it's a good thing. So thank you again for staying with me for this long. And as I say, you know, probably better when I do, press the like button or subscribe or whatever. And now I'm back from Edinburgh, where it was quite difficult to attach my camera to anything. We'll be doing another one of these in a few days' time. So thanks again, and as Charles Dickens, of course, says, bless us all, everyone.